The email notification chimed softly on my phone as I stirred my coffee in the quiet corner of Blackbird Cafe. Congratulations, Ms. Reyes. We are pleased to inform you that Meridian Technologies has accepted your acquisition offer. I smiled, taking a sip of my perfectly bitter espresso. 10 years of meticulous planning, of careful investments and strategic moves across the global tech landscape had culminated in this moment. Meridian Technologies, once my dream workplace, then the setting of my greatest humiliation, and now, my newest acquisition. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Everything okay, Ms. Reyes? The barista's voice pulled me from my thoughts. Perfect, Mia. The coffee is excellent as always. I slipped a 20 into the tip jar, gathered my leather portfolio, and stepped into the crisp autumn morning. Downtown Chicago gleamed in the October sunlight, the steel and glass towers reflecting gold and amber. My driver, Marco, opened the car door as I approached. Good morning, Ms. Reyes. To the office? Not yet, Marco. Let's take a drive along the lake first. I need to savor this moment. As the car glided through the morning traffic, I leaned back against the plush leather seat, my mind drifting to the day Robert walked out of our life together and into his glittering new future, without me. 10 years ago, I was Elena Reyes Blackwood, wife of Robert Blackwood, rising star at Meridian Technologies. I had put my own promising career on hold to support his, managing our home, hosting dinner parties for his colleagues, editing his presentations, even ghostwriting the papers that cemented his reputation as an innovator. He was the face. I was the invisible force behind him. I need space to grow, he'd said that rainy April evening, his designer suitcase already packed by the door. We've grown apart, Elena. I'm not the same person anymore. What he meant was that he'd grown beyond me. That executive vice president Robert Blackwood couldn't be married to just Elena Reyes from accounting anymore. Not when Meridian's stunning new marketing director Vanessa Pierce had set her sights on him. There's no one else, he'd lied, not meeting my eyes. This is about me finding myself. He'd found himself in Vanessa's penthouse before the ink had dried on our divorce papers. I think I deserve most of our assets, he'd said during mediation. After all, I'm the primary breadwinner. Elena chose to step back from her career. That was her decision. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. His lawyer, paid for with the money I'd helped him earn, nodded in solemn agreement. My phone buzzed with an incoming call, jarring me from the bitter memory. The screen displayed, Catherine Chen, CFO. Catherine, I answered, my voice composed, despite the emotions swirling beneath the surface. It's done, she said, her usually calm voice tinged with excitement. The board just unanimously approved. Meridian Technologies is officially part of the Phoenix Group. Congratulations, Elena. Thank you for steering this through, Catherine. Is the transition team ready? Yes. We're prepared to begin integration immediately. The announcement goes out to Meridian employees at 9 a.m. I checked my watch, 7:30. Robert and his executive team would be in their Monday morning leadership meeting right now, blissfully unaware that the company they thought they controlled had just changed hands. I'll be there at 8:30. Have the conference room ready. Will do. And Elena, I can't wait to see their faces. I smiled, ending the call as Marco pulled up alongside the shimmering expanse of Lake Michigan. The morning sun scattered diamonds across the water's surface, a fitting metaphor for what I was about to do to Robert's carefully constructed reality. When Robert left, he hadn't just broken my heart. He'd broken my trust in the fairness of the world. I'd given him everything, my time, my talent, my unwavering support. And in return, he'd discarded me like yesterday's technology. obsolete, replaceable. The settlement is more than generous. His lawyer had insisted as I stared at the insulting figures. Mr. Blackwood is being very fair, considering the circumstances. The circumstances being that I had no income of my own, having spent 8 years supporting his career instead of building mine. What Robert never understood was that I hadn't stopped working when I stepped back from my official career. I'd simply redirected my talents. While managing our household, I'd also managed our investments, quietly multiplying the modest inheritance my grandmother had left me. I'd built a network of contacts across the tech industry, offering freelance consultations under a professional pseudonym. By the time our divorce was finalized, I had the beginnings of a plan. Ms. Reyes? Marco's voice interrupted my thoughts. We should head to the office if you want to arrive by 8:30. Of course, Marco. Thank you. As we merged back into the morning, traffic! I straightened my charcoal Armani suit and checked my reflection in my compact mirror. At 42, I looked better than I had at 32. More confident, more polished, with an edge of steel that hadn't been there before. The soft-spoken Elena who had stood in Robert's shadow had been replaced by someone stronger, someone who had built a technology empire from the ground up in just a decade. The Phoenix Group, named for the mythical bird reborn from its own ashes, now owned 14 technology companies across 3 continents. And I owned the Phoenix Group. Robert, meanwhile, had risen to Chief Operating Officer at Meridian Technologies, second only to CEO Michael Donovan. His marriage to Vanessa had lasted a mere 3 years before she'd moved on to a Silicon Valley venture capitalist. According to my intelligence, he was now dating a 29-year-old VP from their research division. My driver pulled up to the gleaming headquarters of the Phoenix Group, a recently renovated skyscraper in the heart of Chicago's business district. The security guard nodded respectfully as I passed through the lobby. Good morning, Ms. Reyes. Good morning, Carl. Beautiful day, isn't it? Indeed it is, ma'am. The executive elevator whisked me to the 50th floor, where Catherine was waiting, tablet in hand. The transition team is assembled in Conference Room A, she reported as we walked. Legal has prepared the announcements for both companies. The press release goes out at 10 a.m. after you've addressed the Meridian executive team. And they still don't know? Not a clue. We used shell companies for the acquisition, just as you instructed. As far as they're concerned, they're meeting with representatives from a potential strategic partner this morning. I smiled. Perfect. The conference room fell silent as I entered. 20 of my most trusted executives sat around the massive table, each responsible for a different aspect of integrating Meridian Technologies into our corporate structure. Good morning, I began, setting my portfolio on the table. Today, we welcome Meridian Technologies into the Phoenix Group family. This acquisition represents not just a strategic expansion of our enterprise software division, but a personal milestone for me. I paused, looking around the room at the faces of the men and women who had helped build my company from nothing. Many of you know that I once worked at Meridian. What you may not know is that my ex-husband, Robert Blackwood, is currently their COO. Murmurs rippled through the room. Mr. Blackwood and the Meridian executive team are expecting to meet with Phoenix Group representatives at 10 a.m. at their headquarters. What they don't know is that I will be leading that meeting, not as a potential partner, but as their new boss. Catherine handed me a sleek folder containing the detailed transition plan. I've waited 10 years for this moment, I continued, my voice steady despite the emotions threatening to break through. But this is not merely about personal satisfaction. Meridian has developed proprietary AI algorithms that complement our existing technology perfectly. Their client base expands our reach into healthcare and financial services. This acquisition makes sound business sense. I opened the folder and began reviewing the integration timeline, pushing aside the memory of Robert's face the last time. I'd seen him, smug, condescending, as he'd explained why I was entitled to only a fraction of what we'd built together. Elena deserves credit for supporting me, he'd told the mediator, with the patronizing tone one might use for a faithful assistant. But the reality is that my career achievements are my own. By noon, he would learn just how wrong he had been, as the meeting concluded, my assistant, James, approached with my schedule for the day. Your driver will take you to Meridian at 9:30. We've arranged for the Phoenix Group signs to be installed overnight. They'll be unveiled after your announcement. Security has been briefed on the leadership changes. Thank you, James. Has the dossier on the current Meridian executive team been updated? Yes, it's on your tablet, including personal histories, performance evaluations, and loyalty assessments. I nodded, taking the tablet. Over the past month, we'd carefully evaluated every member of Meridian's leadership. Some would stay, those who were competent and ethical. Others, like Robert and CEO Michael Donovan, who had overlooked Robert's affair with a subordinate, would be removed immediately. Catherine fell into step beside me as I walked toward my office. Are you ready for this? She asked quietly. I paused, looking out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the city below. I've been ready for 10 years, Catherine. He won't take it well. Men like Robert never do. I turned to her, a small smile playing at my lips. That's rather the point, isn't it? At 9:30, my car pulled up to the Meridian Technologies building, a structure I hadn't entered since the day I'd come to collect Robert's signature on our final divorce papers. The modern glass facade sparkled in the morning light, the company logo displayed prominently above the entrance. Soon, that logo would be replaced with mine. Ms. Reyes, the receptionist greeted me hesitantly, clearly not expecting the CEO of the Phoenix Group to arrive personally. The conference room is ready for you. Thank you. I'd like to see Mr. Donovan privately before the meeting. Of course, I'll escort you to his office. As we walked through the open floor plan, I noticed employees watching curiously. News of a meeting with the Phoenix Group had clearly circulated, but the nature of that meeting remained our closely guarded secret. Michael Donovan stood as I entered his office, extending his hand with a practiced smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Ms. Reyes, what a pleasant surprise. We were expecting your representatives. I prefer to handle important partnerships personally, I replied, taking his hand briefly. Donovan was in his late 50s, with the polished appearance of a man who'd spent decades in corporate America. I had met him several times during my marriage to Robert, at company functions where he'd barely acknowledged my existence. Please have a seat. Can I offer you coffee? Water? No, thank you. I sat in one of the leather chairs facing his desk. I think it's best we move directly to business. His smile faltered slightly. Of course. Although I was under the impression this was a preliminary meeting about potential collaboration. That was the impression we wanted to give, I said calmly. The reality, Mr. Donovan, is that as of 9 a.m. this morning, Meridian Technologies is a wholly owned subsidiary of the Phoenix Group. The color drained from his face. That's impossible. We're not for sale. I removed the acquisition documents from my portfolio and placed them on his desk. Your board disagreed. They unanimously approved our offer. I leaned forward slightly. You should read your company bylaws more carefully, Michael. The anti-takeover provisions you implemented last year had quite a significant loophole. He stared at the documents, then back at me, shock giving way to anger. This is some kind of revenge play, isn't it? Because of Robert? I kept my expression neutral. This is business, Michael. Meridian has valuable technology and an impressive client list. The Phoenix Group has the global infrastructure to scale those innovations. It's a perfect match. Robert won't stand for this, he said, reaching for his phone. I wouldn't call him just yet, I advised. The executive team meeting is in 20 minutes. I'd prefer to deliver the news to everyone simultaneously. His hand froze above the phone. You're enjoying this. For the first time, I allowed myself a small smile. I won't deny there's a certain satisfaction in the situation, but my primary concern is the successful integration of Meridian into our corporate family. I stood, smoothing my suit jacket. Some leadership changes will be necessary, of course. I'll outline those during the meeting. As I turned to leave, he called after me. You won't get away with this. I paused at the door, looking back at him with the confidence of someone who had already won. I already have, Michael. I already have. The executive conference room was filled with Meridian's leadership team when I arrived. 14 men and women in designer business attire, laptops open, waiting for what they believed would be a standard partnership discussion. Robert sat at Michael's right hand, scrolling through his phone, not even bothering to look up as I entered. He had aged, well, I had to admit, still handsome at 45, with just touches of distinguished gray at his temples. The expensive watch on his wrist was new, a Patek Philippe that probably cost more than our first car together. Michael entered behind me, his face ashen. He took his place at the head of the table but remained standing. Good morning, he began. His voice strained. I'd like to introduce Elena Reyes, CEO of the Phoenix Group. Robert's head snapped up, his eyes widening as they met mine. Recognition, confusion, and the beginnings of alarm crossed his face in rapid succession. Elena? He said, the familiar way he used my first name causing murmurs around the table. Mr. Blackwood, I acknowledged with a professional nod. It's been a while. Michael cleared his throat. Ms. Reyes has some news for us this morning. I took my place at the opposite end of the table, setting down my portfolio with deliberate precision. Thank you, Michael. Good morning, everyone. I'll be direct. The Phoenix Group has acquired Meridian Technologies effective immediately. The transaction was approved by your board of directors and finalized this morning. The room erupted in shocked exclamations and urgent whispers. Robert's face had gone completely white, his knuckles visible as he gripped the arms of his chair. This is the first phase of a comprehensive integration process. I continued once the initial shock had subsided. Over the coming weeks, we will be evaluating all aspects of Meridian's operations and determining how they can best complement the Phoenix Group's existing infrastructure. A woman halfway down the table raised her hand. What does this mean for leadership positions? I recognized her from my research. Diane Foster, VP of Product Development. One of the few executives who had consistently delivered results without engaging in the political games that characterized Meridian's culture. An excellent question, Ms. Foster. There will be some changes. My team has conducted thorough assessments of Meridian's executive structure. Some of you will be invited to continue in your current roles. Others will be offered different positions within the organization, and some positions will be eliminated entirely. Robert finally found his voice. You can't do this. All eyes turned to him, then back to me. The tension in the room thickened as the personal history between us became apparent to those who hadn't already made the connection. I assure you, Mr. Blackwood, everything has been done in accordance with proper corporate governance and securities regulations. I held his gaze steadily. The Phoenix Group now owns Meridian Technologies, along with all its assets, intellectual property, and contractual obligations. This is about us, isn't it? He demanded, rising from his chair. This is your idea of revenge. A ripple of uncomfortable recognition spread through the room as the executives realized they were witnessing not just a corporate takeover, but a personal reckoning. Please sit down, Robert, I said quietly. This is neither the time nor the place for personal matters. The hell it isn't. He remained standing, his face flushed with anger. You orchestrated this whole thing to get back at me. I maintained my composure, aware that every person in the room was watching our exchange carefully. What I orchestrated was the acquisition of a valuable technology company at a fair market price. If you find the timing or circumstances personally uncomfortable, that is unfortunate, but irrelevant to the business at hand. Michael, seeing the situation deteriorating, attempted to regain control. Let's all take a moment to process this information professionally. Ms. Reyes, perhaps you could outline the immediate next steps? I nodded gratefully. Thank you, Michael. My transition team is already on site. Each of you will have individual meetings scheduled throughout the day to discuss your roles moving forward. I opened my tablet, projecting an organizational chart onto the screen at the front of the room. This is the new leadership structure for Meridian as a division of the Phoenix Group. You'll notice several positions have been consolidated, while others have been expanded. The room fell silent as they studied the chart. Robert's position, Chief Operating Officer, was notably absent from the new structure. So was Michael's. As you can see, I continued, some leadership changes are effective immediately. Michael Donovan and Robert Blackwood will be departing the organization today. Diane Foster will serve as interim division president while we complete the integration process. Robert slammed his hand on the table. This is bullshit. Robert, Michael warned, but it was too late. You think you can just walk in here after 10 years and destroy everything I've built? Because I left you? Grow up, Elena. I let his words hang in the air for a moment, the silence emphasizing how unprofessional his outburst had been. When I finally spoke, my voice was calm but carried throughout the room. What you built, Robert. Interesting choice of words. I closed my tablet and looked directly at him. As of this moment, you are no longer employed by Meridian Technologies or the Phoenix Group. Security will escort you to your office to collect your personal belongings. Your access to company systems has already been revoked. I turned to the rest of the room. We'll reconvene at 2 p.m. to discuss the transition in more detail. Until then, please continue with your regular responsibilities. Change can be unsettling, but I assure you that those who demonstrate professionalism, integrity, and competence will find exciting opportunities within our organization. As if on cue, 2 security officers appeared at the door. This meeting is adjourned, I announced, gathering my materials. Thank you for your attention. Robert remained frozen in place as the other executives filed out, their whispered conversations filling the hallway. Only when we were alone, save for the security officers waiting discreetly by the door, did he speak again. Why now? He asked, his voice lower. After all this time? I studied him for a moment, remembering the man I had once loved, the future we had planned together, the dreams I had sacrificed for his success. Because now was the right time. Meridian's market position, its technology portfolio, its client relationships, they all aligned perfectly with the Phoenix Group's strategic objectives. Don't give me that corporate bullshit, he snapped. This is personal and you know it. Closed my portfolio deliberately. You taught me an important lesson, Robert. You showed me that the personal and the professional are always intertwined, no matter how much we pretend otherwise. I stood, straightening my suit jacket. You discarded me when I no longer served your professional ambitions. Now I've made a business decision that happens to affect you personally. The difference is that my decision makes sound financial sense for my shareholders. I never thought you could be this cold. I learned from the best. I nodded to the security officers who stepped forward. Your severance package is generous, more generous than what you offered me when you decided I was dispensable. Consider it my final acknowledgement of our shared history. As I walked toward the door, he called after me. This isn't over, Elena. I paused, looking back at the man who had once been the center of my world. Actually, Robert, it is. It's been over for 10 years. The only difference is that now you finally know it too. In the hallway outside, Catherine was waiting, her expression carefully neutral until the conference room door closed behind me. I take it from Mr. Blackwood's raised voice that he didn't receive the news graciously, she observed. Not particularly. No. The security team will ensure he leaves the premises without incident. We've already disabled his email and access cards. I nodded, watching as employees hurried past, the news of the acquisition spreading through the building like wildfire. Have my things moved to the executive office, I instructed. I'll be working from here for the next few weeks to oversee the transition personally. Of course. Catherine hesitated. Was it worth it? Seeing his face when he realized what had happened, I considered her question as we walked toward what had been Michael Donovan's office, and would now be mine whenever I visited this division. It wasn't about his face in that moment, Catherine. It was about everything that led to this day. The nights I stayed up editing his presentations, the promotions I helped him secure, the innovations I contributed to without credit, the years I invested in his success, only to be discarded when he decided I no longer fit his image. We reached the office where assistants were already removing Michael's personal items and setting up my preferred workspace configuration. Today wasn't about revenge, I continued, looking out over the city skyline. It was about correction, balancing the scales, demonstrating that actions have consequences, even if those consequences take a decade to materialize. Catherine smiled slightly. Well, whatever your motivation, the Phoenix Group just acquired some extremely valuable technology at a very reasonable price. Exactly. I turned from the window, ready to begin the real work of integration. And that's what makes this victory so perfect. Robert always insisted that business was business, separate from personal considerations. I've simply proven that I can play by those rules better than he ever could. As Catherine left to oversee the transition team, I sat at the desk that had once belonged to Michael Donovan, the man who had promoted Robert over more qualified candidates, who had looked the other way during Robert's affair with Vanessa, who had attended our divorce proceedings to show moral support for his star executive. I ran my hands over the polished surface, thinking of the day 10 years ago when I had walked out of the divorce mediation, Robert's condescending words ringing in my ears. You'll be fine, Elena. You're smart. You'll find something appropriate. He had meant something small, something unambitious, something that wouldn't threaten his new narrative about our marriage and its ending. Instead, I had found purpose, power, and finally, after 10 long years of strategic planning, the perfect moment to show Robert Blackwood exactly who Elena Reyes had become. My phone buzzed with a text from James. Press release has gone out. Your schedule is clear until the 2 p.m. meeting. I opened my laptop and began reviewing the Meridian personnel files. There was so much work to be done, evaluations to complete, structures to reorganize, talent to nurture or release. This acquisition wasn't just about Robert. It was about transforming a company with remarkable potential that had been held back by mediocre leadership. A soft knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Come in, I called. Diane Foster entered, looking both excited and anxious about her new role as interim division president. Ms. Reyes, I wanted to thank you for the opportunity. I'm still processing everything, but I'm ready to help with the transition however I can. I gestured for her to sit. Your performance records speak for themselves, Diane. You've consistently delivered exceptional results despite limited support from previous leadership. She smiled wryly. You mean despite Robert blocking my initiatives whenever possible? I raised an eyebrow. You had difficulties working with Mr. Blackwood? Let's just say he didn't appreciate strong women in leadership positions. Present company. Very much included, it seems. I allowed myself a small smile. Then I think you're going to find the culture at the Phoenix Group quite refreshing. We promote based on merit, not gender or politics. As Diane and I began discussing the immediate priorities for the division, I felt a sense of satisfaction that went beyond my personal history with Robert. This acquisition wasn't just about settling old scores. It was about creating something better from the company he had helped shape in his flawed image. By the time our meeting concluded, I had identified a kindred spirit in Diane, someone who had persevered through obstacles similar to those I had faced, who had refused to let others define her potential. We'll speak more at the 2 p.m. meeting, I told her as she stood to leave. In the meantime, I'd appreciate if you could gather the department heads for a brief introduction afterward. I want to reassure the team that this transition will ultimately benefit everyone who's committed to our shared success. After she left, I turned back to my laptop, where an email from Catherine awaited. RB has left the building. Security reports he made several threatening comments about legal action. Legal is prepared if he proceeds. I wasn't concerned. Our acquisition had been meticulously planned, with every potential legal challenge anticipated and addressed. Robert might rage against what had happened, but he had no recourse, just as I had had no recourse when he'd walked away from our marriage with everything I had helped him build. Another email appeared, this one from our PR department, forwarding a LinkedIn post Robert had just published. After many rewarding years at Meridian Technologies, I've decided it's time for new challenges and opportunities. I'm excited to announce that I'll be exploring several executive positions that will allow me to apply my expertise in technology innovation and organizational leadership. I laughed softly to myself. Ever the spin master, Robert was already trying to control the narrative, presenting his abrupt termination as a voluntary career move. It was exactly what I would have expected from him, unable to acknowledge defeat, unwilling to face the consequences of his actions. My phone rang, a number I didn't recognize. Elena Reyes speaking, I answered. You think you're so clever, don't. You? Robert's voice was tight with barely controlled fury. How did you get this number, Robert? Does it matter? What matters is that you just made the biggest mistake of your life. I sighed, gesturing to James through the glass wall to trace the call. I'm going to hang up now. If you have legitimate business concerns, please direct them to our legal department. This isn't over, he hissed. You think you can just waltz in and take everything from me? I made Meridian what it is today. No, Robert, I replied calmly. We made Meridian what it is. The difference is that now I'm finally getting the recognition I deserve for my contributions. You'll regret this, he said, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper. I still have friends in this industry, powerful friends. By the time I'm finished, no one will want to do business with the Phoenix Group. I leaned back in my chair, unfazed by his empty threats. Careful, Robert. That sounds dangerously like an attempt at market manipulation, which would be of great interest to the SEC. You cold-hearted bitch, he spat. You were always jealous of my success. This whole thing is just proof that you never got over me. I had to laugh at the absurdity of his statement. Got over you? Robert, this isn't about feelings. This is about business. Meridian Technologies represented an excellent acquisition opportunity for the Phoenix Group. The fact that removing you from your position gives me personal satisfaction is merely a bonus. Before he could respond, James appeared at my door, nodding to indicate he had traced the call. I have another meeting to attend, I said. Goodbye, Robert, and please don't call this number again. All communication should go through proper channels from now on. I ended the call and turned to James. Have security increase their vigilance. I don't think he'd try anything foolish, but better safe than sorry. Already done, James confirmed. Also, his girlfriend from research just resigned. Apparently, she doesn't want to work for his ex-wife. I shrugged. Her choice. Make sure her departure is processed according to standard procedures. No special treatment, but no penalties either. As James left, I turned back to the window, gazing out at the Chicago skyline. The acquisition of Meridian Technologies was making headlines across business news networks. The Phoenix Group's stock was up 3% already, as analysts praised the strategic fit between the two companies. In the reflection of the glass, I could see the office that was now mine, the office where decisions about my former husband's career had been made, where my contributions had been minimized, where my potential had been dismissed. Now I sat here, not as Elena Reyes Blackwood, the supportive wife who had sacrificed her ambitions for her husband's career, but as Elena Reyes, CEO of the Phoenix Group and new owner of Meridian Technologies. The symmetry was perfect. The circle complete. My phone buzzed with a message from Catherine. A package was just delivered for you. Security has cleared it. Moments later, my assistant brought in a small, elegantly wrapped box. I opened it carefully to find a vintage Cartier watch, a woman's version of the timepiece my father had given me for college graduation, which had been lost during my divorce from Robert. The card read simply, "To new beginnings. Your father would be proud." Mom. I smiled, slipping the watch onto my wrist. My mother had always understood me better than anyone, had seen my potential even when Robert had tried to diminish it. She had been the one to remind me, in the darkest days after my divorce, that setbacks can become setups for comebacks. Thus Phoenix rises, she had told me, inspiring the name for the company I would build from the ashes of my broken marriage. As I prepared for the 2 p.m. meeting, I felt a sense of completion that went beyond business, beyond even the satisfaction of seeing Robert face the consequences of his actions. This was about reclaiming my narrative, about proving, most importantly to myself, that I was capable of not just surviving Robert's betrayal, but of thriving beyond anything he could have imagined. The journey hadn't been about revenge, not. Really, it had been about restoration, about taking back what had been mine all along, my power, my confidence, my future. Robert had walked away from our marriage thinking he was leaving me behind. Instead, he had freed me to become the woman who would eventually become his boss, and in doing so, had sealed his own professional fate. As I gathered my materials for the meeting, I glanced once more at the company logo now displayed on my laptop screen, a stylized phoenix rising from flames, wings outstretched toward the future. After 10 years in the ashes, I had risen, and I was just getting started. The 2 p.m. meeting went exactly as planned. I presented the Phoenix Group's integration strategy with precision and confidence, watching as Meridian's remaining executives shifted from anxiety to cautious optimism. Even those who had been loyal to Robert seemed to recognize the professional opportunity this acquisition represented. Our goal is not to dismantle what works, I explained, standing before the sleek digital display showing our projected organizational chart. Meridian's innovation in AI-driven analytics is precisely why we pursued this acquisition. What we're changing is the leadership structure, creating clearer pathways for advancement based on performance rather than politics. There was a pointed silence at this last remark. Everyone in the room knew exactly what kind of political environment had flourished under Robert and Michael's leadership. Diane Foster, newly appointed as interim division president, nodded in agreement. I think I speak for many of us when I say this change has been long overdue. After the meeting, Catherine pulled me aside in the hallway. Impressive performance. You'd never know you were addressing the company where your ex-husband tried to erase your contributions. That's precisely why it needed to be professional, I replied, watching the executives disperse to their respective departments. This can't be seen as a personal vendetta if it's going to succeed. Well, Robert certainly isn't taking it professionally, Catherine said, handing me her tablet. His lawyer has been calling nonstop, demanding a meeting. I scanned the messages and smiled. Thomas Aldridge. He was our divorce attorney, you know. Interesting that Robert still uses him. Conflict of interest? Massively. Have legal point that out in their response. I handed the tablet back. Now, show me to Robert's office. I want to see what he left behind. Security had already swept the COO's office for anything suspicious, removing Robert's personal effects and changing the access codes. The space was impressive. Corner views of the Chicago skyline, custom furniture, a private bathroom with shower. Far more luxurious than what a COO typically warranted. He certainly made himself comfortable, Catherine observed, running a finger along the expensive desk. I opened drawers, finding them mostly empty except for company stationery and a few forgotten items. A pair of cufflinks, breath mints, a photo face down in the bottom drawer. I lifted the photo, not surprised, to find it was of us, Robert and me at the company holiday party 6 years into our marriage. I was looking up at him adoringly while he smiled confidently at the camera. The perfect corporate wife, supporting her ambitious husband. You should have that shredded, Catherine suggested. No, I said, slipping it into my portfolio. Some things are worth remembering. To forget the past is to risk repeating it. My phone chimed with a message from James. Robert is giving interviews to tech blogs, claiming the acquisition was hostile and personally motivated. I sighed. Have PR prepare a statement emphasizing the business rationale behind the acquisition. Include quotes from board members about the strategic value. And find me everything Robert has said publicly about Meridian in the last year. Earnings calls, interviews, conference panels. What are you thinking? Catherine asked as we left the office. I'm thinking Robert has been exaggerating Meridian's position and taking credit for innovations that came from his team. When we compare his public statements to the actual company data we now have access to, the discrepancies will be enlightening. The rest of the afternoon passed in a flurry of meetings, department heads, key engineers, sales directors, all curious about their new ownership and what it meant for their futures. I made sure to meet with Diane regularly, reinforcing her authority during this transition period. By 7 p.m., the building had mostly emptied. I remained in my new office, reviewing personnel files and performance evaluations, cross-referencing them with the project successes Robert had claimed as his own. The pattern was exactly as I'd suspected, Robert taking credit for others' work while creating a culture where challenging him meant career suicide. A knock at my door interrupted my analysis. Come in, I called, expecting Catherine or James. Instead, a woman in her early 30s entered, elegant, poised, with an expression that suggested she was choosing her words carefully. Ms. Reyes, I'm Caroline Miller. I lead the AI Ethics Committee here at Meridian. I gestured for her to sit. Ms. Miller, your team's work on algorithmic transparency has been impressive. Please, what can I do for you at this hour? She hesitated, then spoke with quiet determination. I wanted to speak with you privately about some concerns I have regarding Project Daedalus. I leaned forward slightly. Project Daedalus was Meridian's most advanced AI initiative, and a primary reason for my interest in acquiring the company. What concerns? Robert, Mr. Blackwood, has been pressuring our team to bypass certain ethical safeguards to accelerate development. When I raised objections, he threatened to reassign me. That was 2 weeks ago. I studied her carefully. Do you have documentation of these concerns? She removed a flash drive from her pocket. Everything's here. The original safety protocols, Mr. Blackwood's modified requirements, my team's risk assessments, and the emails where he dismissed our concerns. I took the drive, turning it over, in my hand. Why bring this to me now? Caroline straightened in her chair. Because today is the first day I've felt safe doing so. Mr. Blackwood made it clear that anyone who didn't follow his directives would be marginalized or terminated. Thank you for your courage, Ms. Miller. I'll review these materials personally and meet with you tomorrow. I placed the drive in my desk drawer. The Phoenix Group takes AI ethics very seriously. You won't face retaliation for doing the right thing. After she left, I immediately called Catherine. I need you back at Meridian. We may have a serious issue with Project Daedalus. Within 30 minutes, Catherine had assembled a small team of our most trusted tech experts to review Caroline's documentation. We worked late into the night, uncovering a troubling pattern of shortcuts and ignored warnings. This explains the accelerated development timeline Robert has been promoting to investors, Catherine said, pointing to a particularly alarming email. He knew these safety concerns would eventually come to light, so he was pushing to demonstrate results before that happened. I rubbed my temples, feeling a headache building. If these algorithms had been deployed as Robert intended, the potential for bias and security vulnerabilities would have been substantial. Not to mention the regulatory violations, added Sanjay, our head of compliance. The EU would have shut this down immediately, possibly with significant penalties. I stood, pacing the office as I considered the implications. This wasn't just about Robert's management style or my personal history with him. This was a genuine ethical breach that could have damaged both companies. Implement a complete freeze. On Project Daedalus, I instructed. No code changes, no demonstrations, no communications about its status until we've completed a thorough review. Robert won't stay quiet about this, Catherine warned. He'll spin it as you interfering with Meridian's innovation. Let him try, I replied, a cold determination settling over me. We have the documentation. If he wants to publicly defend, cutting corners on AI safety, I welcome that conversation. By midnight, we had established a clear action plan for addressing the Daedalus situation. As the team dispersed, Catherine lingered. This changes things, she observed. It's not just about the acquisition anymore. It never was, I replied, gathering my things. This was always about more than Robert. It was about building something better than he could imagine, something with integrity at its foundation. As my driver took me back to my penthouse apartment, I scrolled through the evening's news coverage of the acquisition. Most business analysts were positive, citing the strategic fit between the companies. A few mentioned my history with Robert, framing it as an unusual corporate coincidence rather than the culmination of a decade-long journey. One headline from a tech blog caught my attention. Blackwood calls Phoenix acquisition personal vendetta by ex-wife. I clicked on the article, unsurprised to find Robert portraying himself as the victim of my supposed inability to move on from our relationship. What was surprising was his claim that I had always been jealous of his success, and that I lacked the technical expertise to understand Meridian's innovative work. I forwarded the article to our legal team with a simple note. Add this to the file. We may need it later. At home, I kicked off my heels and poured myself a glass of Cabernet, stepping onto my terrace overlooking Lake Michigan. The night was clear, the city lights reflecting on the dark water. 10 years ago, I had left our divorce mediation and checked into a modest hotel, uncertain of my future but determined to rebuild. Now I stood 50 floors above Chicago, having achieved more than Robert had ever thought possible. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Saw the news. So proud of you. Elena, your father would say you've exceeded the assignment. I smiled, remembering my father's favorite phrase whenever I brought home top grades or won competitions. Good job, Lena, he would say. But have you exceeded the assignment? It was his way of pushing me to go beyond expectations, to redefine what was possible. Taking over Meridian had certainly exceeded the assignment. My phone rang, showing a Chicago area code I didn't recognize. Elena Reyes, I answered cautiously. Ms. Reyes, this is Detective Mark Sandoval with Chicago PD. I'm calling because we received a complaint from a Robert Blackwood about threatening behavior from you and your company's security team. I set down my wine glass. I see. And what exactly am I supposed to have threatened, Detective? Mr. Blackwood claims that during his exit from Meridian Technologies today, your security personnel made threatening comments and that you personally indicated there would be consequences if he didn't cooperate. Detective, everything that occurred today was documented by multiple witnesses and security cameras. Mr. Blackwood was terminated as part of a corporate acquisition and escorted from the building according to standard protocols. If anyone made threats, it was Mr. Blackwood toward me and my staff. Would you be willing to provide that documentation? Of course. My legal team will send everything to you tomorrow morning. Is there anything else? The detective hesitated. Ms. Reyes, off the record, this feels like a waste of police resources over what's essentially a corporate dispute, but we have to follow up on all complaints. I understand, Detective. You're doing your job. We'll provide whatever you need to close this matter quickly. After ending the call, I immediately contacted our head of security to ensure all footage of Robert's exit was preserved and ready to share with the police. Then I called our legal counsel. Roberts filed a police complaint, I explained, claiming our security team threatened him. David Chen, our chief legal officer, sighed audibly. Classic deflection tactic. He's trying to establish a counter-narrative before we can fully implement the transition. Will it cause problems? Nothing we can't handle, but it suggests he's going to fight this every step of the way. Let him, I said, watching the moonlight glint off the lake. Every baseless accusation just gives us more ammunition. The next morning, I arrived at Meridian's headquarters early, determined to address the Project Daedalus situation head-on. Caroline Miller was already waiting in the conference room, along with her core team of AI engineers. Thank you for coming in early, I began, taking a seat at the head of the table. I've reviewed your documentation and share your concerns about the ethical compromises Mr. Blackwood was demanding. Relief washed over Caroline's face. What happens now? A complete reset, I explained. We're pausing development to conduct a thorough ethical review. I'd like your team to lead that process, working directly with the Phoenix Group's AI Governance Committee. For the next hour, we outlined a revised approach to Project Daedalus, one that prioritized safety and ethical considerations without abandoning the innovative core of the technology. When the meeting concluded, Caroline lingered. Ms. Reyes, may I speak frankly? Please do. Some of us knew about your history with Robert. It was an open secret among the leadership team. They would joke about it sometimes. She hesitated. Go on, I encouraged, keeping my expression neutral. Robert would tell people that you lacked vision, that you were competent but not innovative. When your company started making headlines, he dismissed your success as lucky timing or suggested you had powerful male backers. I nodded, unsurprised, but still feeling the sting of his continued dismissal. Why are you telling me this, Carolyn? Because I want you to know that not everyone believed him. Some of us researched you, followed your career. What you've built with the Phoenix Group is extraordinary, and it had nothing to do with luck or men opening doors for you. I smiled, genuinely touched by her words. Thank you, Caroline. That means more than you might realize. After she left, I spent the morning in back-to-back meetings with department heads, carefully assessing which leaders could adapt to our new corporate culture and which were too entrenched in Robert's way of doing things. Around noon, Catherine burst into my office looking uncharacteristically flustered. Robert's gone to the press with claims about Project Daedalus, she announced without preamble. He's saying you've halted a breakthrough innovation out of spite and that your lack of technical background makes you unqualified to evaluate its importance. I took the tablet she offered, scanning the interview Robert had given to a prominent tech publication. His claims were a masterful blend of half-truths and outright fabrications, technically impressive but ethically questionable, just like the man himself. He's trying to rally support from the tech community, Catherine continued, positioning himself as the visionary being stifled by corporate bureaucracy, and conveniently omitting the ethical concerns his own team raised, I noted, returning the tablet. Schedule a press conference for tomorrow morning. We'll address this directly, with Caroline and her team present to explain the legitimate safety issues. That's playing right into his hand, Catherine cautioned. He wants to make this a public battle. I smiled grimly. Sometimes the best way to disarm an opponent is to step directly into their attack. Robert wants a fight about innovation versus bureaucracy? Let's give him a fight about ethics versus recklessness instead. Later that afternoon, I received a surprising visit from Michael Donovan, the former CEO, who had requested a brief meeting through proper channels. Thank you for seeing me, Elena, he said as he settled into the chair across from my desk. He looked smaller somehow, without the authority of his position. What can I do for you, Michael? He cleared his throat uncomfortably. I wanted to apologize for my reaction yesterday. It was unprofessional. Yes, it was, I agreed, not making this easier for him. But understandable under the circumstances. The thing is, he continued, Robert has been calling me non-stop, trying to convince me to join some kind of legal challenge against the acquisition. He's even suggesting we could rally investors to force a reversal. This was unexpected. And you're telling me this because it won't work, and he's going to damage a lot of relationships trying. Michael leaned forward. Look, I won't pretend I was fair to you back when you were married to Robert. I bought into his narrative about you, and that was wrong. I studied him carefully, trying to discern his true motivation. What are you really here for, Michael? He sighed heavily. I'm 63, Elena. Too old to start over, too young to retire completely. I thought maybe we could discuss a consulting arrangement, something that would let me continue contributing without being in a leadership position. Ah, there it was. Self-interest, thinly veiled as reconciliation. I appreciate your candor about Robert's plans, I said carefully. As for a consulting role, send a formal proposal to HR outlining what you envision. I can't make any promises, but we'll consider it based on merit. After he left, I called Catherine immediately. Robert's trying to organize opposition to the acquisition. Get legal to prepare for potential shareholder challenges, though I doubt he'll find much support. Already on it, she replied. Also, our team found something interesting in Robert's company emails. You'll want to see this personally. 20 minutes later, Catherine spread several printed emails on my desk, all from Robert to various venture capitalists and competing companies. He's been shopping Meridian's proprietary technology, she explained, pointing to specific passages. Not officially, of course, just hinting at what might be available if the right opportunity came along. I scanned the emails, anger building as I recognized what I was seeing. He was preparing his exit strategy, looking for a better offer while pretending to be committed to Meridian. Exactly. And based on the timestamps, this started right after he was passed over for CEO when the board chose to extend Michael's contract last year. I gathered the emails, a cold determination settling over me. This changes our approach. Robert isn't just a disgruntled ex-employee, he's actively tried to harm Meridian's business interests. Have legal prepare a cease and desist letter addressing his public statements and hinting at what we've discovered. Don't explicitly mention these emails yet. Let him wonder exactly what we know. That evening, as I worked late in what had been Robert's office, my phone rang with a number I hadn't seen in years. Elena Reyes, I answered cautiously. Elena, it's Vanessa. Vanessa Pierce. I froze, my free hand gripping the edge of the desk. Vanessa, the woman Robert had left me for, his second wife, now apparently his ex. This is unexpected, I managed to say, my voice steady despite the surge of old emotions. What can I do for you, Vanessa? I saw the news about Meridian, she said, her voice carrying that same confident tone I remembered. Quite the power move. I have to admit, I'm impressed. Thank you, but I doubt you called just to compliment my business strategy. She laughed softly. Direct as ever. No, I'm calling because Robert reached out to me yesterday, ranting about conspiracy theories and revenge plots. He seems to think I might want to join his crusade against you. And do you? I asked, curious despite myself. God, no. Robert and I have been over for years, but I thought you should know he's contacting everyone from his past who might harbor resentment toward you. He's desperate. I considered her words carefully. Why tell me this? We were hardly friends. There was a pause before she answered. Because I owe you an apology, Elena. What Robert and I did to you was wrong. I was younger then, ambitious, convinced that the rules didn't apply to me. I've had plenty of time to regret my part in how you were treated. I hadn't expected this. Not after all these years. I appreciate that, Vanessa. Truly. There's something else, she continued. When Robert and I were still together, he admitted something to me during a fight. He said that many of the innovations he'd been credited with at Meridian had actually been your ideas, concepts you'd discussed with him that he'd presented as his own. A cold wave washed over me. I had suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed after all these years still hit hard. Why tell me this now? I asked. Because he's doing it again, Vanessa replied. This Project Daedalus he's so publicly defending? The core concept came from a young engineer named Wei Lin. Robert rejected the idea when Wei presented it officially, then quietly implemented it himself 6 months later after Wei had left the company. I made a note of the name. How do you know this? Wei works for my current company now. When he saw Robert's interview about Daedalus, he recognized his own work. After ending the call with Vanessa, I sat in silence for several minutes, processing this new information. Then I called Catherine despite the late hour. I need you to find someone named Wei Lin, former Meridian engineer, likely left within the last 2 years, currently working with Vanessa Pierce. Vanessa Pierce? Your ex's ex? That's an unexpected alliance. Not an alliance, I corrected. Just a common interest in seeing Robert face the consequences of his actions. And Catherine? This could be the key to neutralizing Robert's public campaign against us. Find Wei Lin as quickly as possible. As I ended the call, I walked to the eaves-on window, looking out at the Chicago night skyline. Robert had built his career on taking credit for others' ideas. Mine, Wei Lin's, probably many others. His public persona as an innovator and visionary was as carefully constructed as it was fundamentally false. Now he was trying to position me as the villain in a story about innovation versus bureaucracy, but with Wei Lin's testimony, I could reframe the narrative entirely. This wasn't about my personal history with Robert or even about corporate politics. It was about intellectual honesty and giving credit where it was due. My phone pinged with an incoming email, the press briefing, materials for tomorrow's conference, where we would address Robert's claims about Project Daedalus. I made a quick note to leave space for potential new information, depending on how quickly we could locate Wei Lin. As I gathered my things to leave for the night, I noticed the photograph I'd found in Robert's desk, the one of us at the company holiday party years ago. I studied it again, seeing now what I hadn't recognized then, the subtle possessiveness in the way he held me, the way he faced the camera while I faced him, the clear power imbalance between us captured in a single frame. Placed the photo back in my portfolio, not as a reminder of what I had lost, but of what I had escaped, and ultimately, transcended. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as Robert continued his campaign against me and the acquisition. But for the first time since this process began, I felt completely certain of my path forward. This wasn't just about correcting the record of my past with Robert. It was about ensuring that the future of Meridian Technologies was built on authentic innovation and ethical leadership. Everything that Robert had pretended to embody, but never truly delivered. As my car pulled away from Meridian's headquarters, I made a mental note to call my mother in the morning. She had always told me that living well was the best revenge, but she had never specified that sometimes living well includes becoming the boss of the man who thought he could diminish you, and that particular form of living well felt exceptionally satisfying indeed. Morning broke over Chicago with a spectacular sunrise that painted the sky in shades of amber and gold. I watched it from my temporary office at Meridian, having arrived before dawn to prepare for the press conference. Sleep had been elusive, my mind racing with strategies and contingencies. Wei Lin confirmed for a video call at 8 a.m., Catherine announced, entering with 2 cups of coffee. He's sending documentation that corroborates his claim about Project Daedalus. Perfect timing, I said, accepting the coffee gratefully. Is the press room ready? Completely. Caroline and her team are prepped and ready to present the ethical concerns. Legal has reviewed all materials to ensure we're not overstepping. I nodded, scanning the briefing documents one last time. And Robert? Scheduled his own press conference for noon at the Four Seasons. Clearly planning to counter whatever we present. A smile tugged at the corner of my mouth. Always reactive rather than proactive. Some things never change. At precisely 8 a.m., Wei Lin appeared on my screen, young, serious, and visibly nervous, about going public with his story. Mr. Lin, thank you for speaking with me on such short notice, I began. Ms. Reyes, I've followed your work with the Phoenix Group for years, he replied earnestly. When Vanessa told me what was happening with Meridian and Project Daedalus, I knew I had to come forward. Over the next 30 minutes, Wei detailed how he had presented his concept for a self-correcting AI algorithm to Robert 2 years ago, complete with preliminary designs and research. Robert had dismissed the idea as impractical and too resource-intensive in front of the entire development team. 6 months later, after I'd left for my current position, I saw an internal Meridian newsletter announcing a new initiative led by Mr. Blackwood. The description was practically verbatim from my proposal. Do you have documentation of your original presentation? I asked. Wei nodded, sharing his screen to show dated slides, research notes, and even the email exchange with Robert following the rejection. Would you be willing to join our press conference? Remotely today? Your testimony would be invaluable. Wei hesitated briefly before nodding. Yes, it's time someone stood up to Robert Blackwood's pattern of intellectual theft. After the call ended, Catherine looked at me with newfound respect. How did you know to look for this angle? Because I lived it, I replied simply. Robert's greatest skill has always been recognizing and appropriating other people's brilliant ideas. I just needed to find his most recent victim. The press conference was scheduled for 10 a.m. By 9:30, the room was filled with technology journalists, business reporters, and industry analysts. Caroline Miller and her team sat in the front row, prepared to present their ethical concerns about Project Daedalus. On a screen to the side, Wei Lin waited in a virtual green room, ready to join when called upon. At precisely 10 a.m., I stepped to the podium, dressed in a steel blue suit that projected both authority and approachability. Camera. Flashes erupted as I adjusted the microphone. Good morning. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Elena Reyes, CEO of the Phoenix Group. Yesterday, former Meridian Technologies COO Robert Blackwood made several public statements regarding our decision to pause development on Project Daedalus following our acquisition of Meridian. Today, I'd like to set the record straight. I gestured to Caroline, who joined me at the podium. This is Caroline Miller, head of Meridian's AI Ethics Committee. For the past several months, Ms. Miller and her team have raised significant concerns about the direction of Project Daedalus under Mr. Blackwood's leadership. Caroline stepped forward, her voice steady as she outlined the ethical shortcuts and ignored warnings that had characterized Robert's management of the project. She presented emails, meeting minutes, and risk assessments, all documenting a troubling pattern of prioritizing speed over safety. When she finished, I returned to the podium. As you can see, our decision to pause Project Daedalus was based on legitimate ethical and safety concerns raised by Meridian's own experts, concerns that were systematically dismissed under previous leadership. A reporter from TechWire raised his hand. Ms. Reyes, Robert Blackwood has suggested that your personal history with him has influenced this decision. How do you respond? I had been waiting for this question. The documentation speaks for itself. These concerns were raised well before the Phoenix Group's acquisition of Meridian. My history with Mr. Blackwood has no bearing on the legitimate safety issues identified by Meridian's own ethics team. But you don't deny that there's personal satisfaction in overruling his flagship project? The reporter pressed. I allowed, myself a small smile. I take no satisfaction in discovering that a promising technology was being developed with insufficient ethical safeguards. What does satisfy me is creating an environment where professionals like Ms. Miller can raise concerns without fear of retaliation. Another hand shot up, a woman from Bloomberg Business. Ms. Reyes, Mr. Blackwood has positioned himself as the visionary behind Project Daedalus. Can you comment on that? This was the perfect opening. Actually, I'd like to introduce someone who can address that question directly. Joining us remotely is Wei Lin, a former Meridian engineer now working for Precision Analytics. Wei's face appeared on the large screen, composed but determined. For the next 10 minutes, he methodically outlined how his concept had been rejected, then resurrected under Robert's name after his departure. He shared screen captures of his original presentation alongside Meridian's internal documents, highlighting the unmistakable similarities. When Wei finished, the room erupted with questions. I fielded them calmly, watching the narrative shift. In real time, as journalists recognized the larger story emerging, not a personal vendetta between ex-spouses, but a systematic pattern of ethical compromises and intellectual appropriation under Robert's leadership. Our plan moving forward, I concluded, is to reset Project Daedalus with proper ethical guidelines, appropriate safety protocols, and, most importantly, correct attribution for the innovative concepts at its core. We believe in the potential of this technology when developed responsibly, with proper recognition for all contributors. As the press conference ended, I noticed several journalists already typing frantically on their laptops, racing to be first with this new angle. Catherine appeared at my side, eyes gleaming with triumph. "Robert just canceled his noon press conference," she whispered. "His PR team cited scheduling conflicts." I suppressed a smile. How convenient. Back in my office, I watched as the first articles began appearing online. Phoenix CEO reveals ethical concerns behind Daedalus pause. Former engineer claims Blackwood stole AI concept. Questions of credit and safety cloud Blackwood's legacy at Meridian. My phone buzzed with a text from Diane Foster. "Brilliant strategy. The engineering team is buzzing, many saying they've had similar experiences with Robert taking credit." Before I could respond, James appeared at my door. "Ms. Reyes, Robert. Blackwood is in the lobby, demanding to see you. Security is containing the situation, but he's causing quite a scene." I considered my options briefly. Have security bring him to conference room C. Make sure the room's recording system is active. "Are you sure that's wise?" Catherine asked after James left. "No," I admitted. "But it's necessary. This confrontation was inevitable. Better to have it on my terms, in a controlled environment." I took a moment to center myself, then headed to the conference room where Robert waited, pacing like a caged animal. When I entered, he spun to face me, his normally composed facade cracked by fury. "You orchestrated this whole thing," he spat. "Found some disgruntled ex-employee to back up your convenient narrative." I closed the door behind me calmly. Wei Lin's evidence speaks for itself, Robert, as does Caroline's documentation of the ethical concerns you dismissed. This is character assassination. You're trying to destroy everything I've built. "Everything you've built?" I repeated softly. "Or everything you've claimed credit for building?" He slammed his hand on the conference table. "You think you're so clever, don't you? Using our past to fuel this vendetta." "Our past has nothing to do with the facts presented today," I replied, maintaining my composure. "Project Daedalus had serious ethical issues that you ignored. Wei Lin created the core concept that you appropriated. These aren't emotional claims. Robert, they're documented facts." "Facts can be manipulated," he sneered, "just like you manipulated the Meridian board into approving this acquisition." I took a seat at the table, gesturing for him to do the same. He remained standing too, agitated to comply. "The board approved the acquisition because it made financial and strategic sense," I explained, as if to a child. just as the evidence against you is compelling because it's substantial and verifiable. You've been planning this for years, he accused, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. I studied him thoughtfully. You always did project your own motivations onto others, Robert. Not everyone operates from a place of calculation and self-interest. Says the woman who secretly built a technology empire just to take over her ex-husband's company, he scoffed. Is that really what you think happened? I asked, genuinely curious about his perspective. That I spent a decade building the Phoenix Group, acquiring 13 other companies, developing groundbreaking technologies, creating thousands of jobs, all as an elaborate revenge plot against you? Put so plainly, the absurdity of his accusation hung in the air between us. Your ego truly is remarkable, Robert, I continued when he didn't respond. Even now you can't conceive of my success except in relation to you. His expression shifted, desperation replacing anger. What do you want from me, Elena? Money? A public apology? Name your price. I don't want anything from you, I replied honestly. This isn't about you anymore. It's about creating something better than what existed before. A company where innovation is ethical, where credit is given where due, where leadership means lifting others up rather than stepping on them. He laughed bitterly. Always the idealist. That's why you never understood what it takes to succeed in this industry. And yet, I said, rising from my chair, I'm the one sitting in the CEO's office, while you're unemployed and facing public scrutiny for ethical violations and intellectual theft. Perhaps your understanding of success needs revision. His face darkened. This isn't over. Actually, Robert, it is. Security will escort you from the building. Any future communication should go through our legal department. I moved toward the door, then paused. Oh, and the non-compete clause in your severance agreement is being enforced. Given the evidence of your communications with competitors while still employed at Meridian, you might want to consult your attorney about your options, which are, I'm afraid, rather limited. As I left the conference room, I heard him call after me, his voice a mixture of anger and something that sounded almost like pleading. You can't just erase me from Meridian's story, Elena. I built this company. I didn't turn back. There was no need. The truth was already emerging, and Robert's place in Meridian's history was being rightfully recalibrated. Not erased, but accurately contextualized as someone who had too often taken credit for others' innovations while cutting corners on ethics and safety. By mid-afternoon, the story had evolved beyond Robert and me to focus on the broader issues of ethical AI development and proper attribution in the technology industry. Several other former Meridian employees had come forward with similar stories of having their ideas appropriated by Robert or other executives in his inner circle. Catherine found me reviewing these new accounts in my office. The narrative has completely shifted, she observed. This is no longer about a personal conflict between you and Robert. It's becoming a case study in toxic leadership and intellectual honesty, which is exactly as it should be, I replied. The real story was never about our marriage or its ending. It was about the patterns of behavior that affected dozens of careers and potentially compromised an important technology. Speaking of which, Catherine said, handing me a tablet, the AI Governance Committee has completed their preliminary review of Project Daedalus. They believe the core concept is sound, but recommend a complete rebuilding of the safety protocols and testing procedures. I scanned the report, noting the recommended timeline and resource requirements. Have Caroline Miller lead the redesign. And see if Wei Lin would be interested in a consulting role to help implement his original vision properly. Already reached out to him, Catherine confirmed. He's intrigued by the possibility. My phone buzzed with a notification. Robert had released a statement through his attorney. While I dispute many of the characterizations made at today's press conference, I acknowledge that collaborative innovation sometimes results in confusion about attribution. I remain proud of my contributions to Meridian Technologies and wish the company continued success under its new ownership. I handed the phone to Catherine, a non-apology wrapped in a face-saving retreat. It's the best we could hope for without litigation, she noted. His attorney probably advised him that fighting this publicly would only draw more attention to the evidence against him. I nodded, turning to look out the window at the Chicago skyline. Schedule a company-wide meeting for tomorrow. It's time to refocus everyone on the future rather than the past. That evening, as I prepared to leave the office, Diane Foster knocked on my door. "Elena, do you have a moment?" "Of course, Diane. Come in." She entered, carrying a small stack of folders. "These are personnel files that didn't make it into the official HR system. Robert kept them in a locked cabinet in his office." I frowned, accepting the folders. "Private records? That's concerning." "They're evaluations of female employees who challenged him or rejected his advances," Diane explained, her expression grim, "including mine. Each contains performance concerns that mysteriously appeared after the incidents." I opened the top folder, scanning the contents with growing disgust. This is systematic. He was building cases against women who threatened his authority or rebuffed him. Exactly. Several promising careers were derailed by these concerns when they came up during promotion reviews. I closed the folder, my resolve hardening. I want a complete review of every employee whose career might have been affected by these tactics. Those still with the company should be reassessed immediately for advancement opportunities. Those who left should be contacted about potential return offers, or, at minimum, corrected reference letters. Diane smiled slightly. "I thought you might say that. I've already started compiling a list." After she left, I sat with the folders for a long moment, thinking about all the lives Robert had impacted, all the careers stunted, all the innovations, delayed or denied, all because one man couldn't bear to share credit or acknowledge women as equals. My phone rang. My mother calling for our evening check-in. "I saw the press conference," she said instead of hello. "You handled it perfectly. Thanks, Mom. It's been quite a day. Are you okay? Really okay?" I considered the question seriously. Yes. Better than okay, actually. Today wasn't about Robert and me anymore. It was about all the people who deserved better than what they got under his leadership. "That's my girl," she said, pride evident in her voice. Always seeing the bigger picture. After we hung up, I gathered my things and headed to the elevator. As the doors closed, I caught my reflection in the polished metal. Confident, assured, purposeful. So different from the woman who had walked out of divorce mediation 10 years ago, wounded but determined to rebuild. The doors opened on the ground floor, and I stepped out into the evening, nodding to the security guard as I passed. "Good night, Ms. Reyes." "Good night, Carl. See you tomorrow." Outside, the city was alive with lights and movement. My driver waited at the curb, holding the car door open. "Home, Ms. Reyes?" I paused, considering. "Not yet, Marco. Take me to the Phoenix Group headquarters first. There's something I need to check on." 20 minutes later, I stood in my original office at the Phoenix Group, looking at the wall of framed milestones. Our first acquisition, our breakthrough technology patent, the Forbes cover featuring me as technology's rising phoenix. Each represented a step in the journey that had brought me to this moment. My assistant had left a stack of messages on my desk. Congratulations from board members who had seen the press conference, interview requests from major business publications, even a note from a prominent business school asking if I would speak to their MBA class about ethical leadership. None mentioned Robert. None framed the day's events as a personal drama between former spouses. The narrative had successfully shifted to where it belonged, on the substantive issues of leadership, ethics, and innovation. I selected one message from the pile, an email. From Caroline Miller, sent just an hour ago. "Thank you for creating space for the truth today. The team is energized by the possibility of developing Daedalus the right way. For many of us, it's the first time we've felt our expertise truly valued. This, I realized, was the real victory. Not seeing Robert's reputation diminished, but elevating the voices that had been silenced under his leadership. Not tearing down what he had built, but creating something better in its place. My phone buzzed with a text from Catherine. Just heard from legal. Robert's lawyer reached out about a potential settlement to avoid further public discussion of the Wei Lin situation. They're surprisingly amenable to our terms. I smiled, typing back, "Proceed as planned, fair but firm." As I prepared to leave, a final email notification appeared on my screen from Thomas Aldridge, the attorney who had represented Robert in our divorce and was apparently still representing him now. "Ms. Reyes," it began formally, "my client has authorized me to inform you that he will be leaving Chicago to pursue opportunities on the West Coast. He has agreed to all non-compete provisions and will make no further public statements regarding Meridian Technologies, Project Daedalus, or his departure from the company. In return, he asks only that the Phoenix Group refrain from any unnecessary disparagement of his prior contributions to Meridian's growth." I forwarded the email to our legal team with a simple note. Acceptable terms. Prepare the agreement. Robert was retreating, not with grace, perhaps, but with the recognition that further battle would only damage him more. He was cutting his eye, losses and attempting to salvage what remained of his professional reputation. 10 years ago, I had been the one forced to retreat, to rebuild from the ashes of the life he had destroyed. The symmetry wasn't lost on me, but I took no joy in his downfall. What I felt instead was a profound sense of closure, a chapter finally completed, a story moving forward rather than circling endlessly around old wounds. I gathered my things and headed back to the elevator, stopping briefly to straighten one of the framed photographs on the wall, the groundbreaking ceremony for the Phoenix Group's research campus, where we were developing technologies that would shape the future of the industry. That was where my focus belonged now, not on Robert or the past, but on the future I was building with the people who shared my vision of ethical innovation and authentic leadership. Outside, Marco was waiting with the car. "Home now, Ms. Reyes?" "Yes, Marco. Home." As we drove through the night-lit streets of Chicago, I felt lighter than I had in years, unburdened by the weight of unresolved history. Robert had once left me behind, thinking I would remain in his shadow. Instead, I had risen beyond anything he could have imagined, not to prove something to him, but to fulfill the potential he had never fully recognized. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as we continued integrating Meridian into the Phoenix Group. There would be strategies to refine, teams to rebuild, innovations to nurture. But tonight, I allowed myself to simply appreciate the journey that had brought me here. From the broken-hearted woman signing divorce papers to the CEO whose vision was reshaping an industry. The true revenge, I realized, hadn't been acquiring Robert's company or becoming his boss. It had been refusing to let his betrayal define me, choosing instead to define myself through what I could create, whom I could elevate, and how I could lead. As we pulled up to my building, I noticed a small package waiting with the doorman, delivered by courier just minutes earlier. Inside the elevator, I opened it to find a vintage Phoenix bird brooch with a note in my mother's handwriting. "For tomorrow, remember who you are." I smiled, pinning it to my lapel as I entered my penthouse. Tomorrow, I would wear it proudly as I addressed the combined teams of Meridian and the Phoenix Group, not as Robert's ex-wife, or even as the woman who had orchestrated a corporate takeover, but simply as Elena Reyes, a leader with a vision for something better than what had come before. And that, I knew with absolute certainty, was the most complete victory of all. 6 months passed since the acquisition of Meridian Technologies. Spring had returned to Chicago, bringing with it the promise of renewal that seemed particularly fitting for what we had accomplished. I stood at the podium in the Phoenix Group's newly completed Innovation Center, surveying the gathered crowd of employees, industry leaders, and press. The atmosphere hummed with anticipation as we prepared to unveil the reimagined Project Daedalus, now called Project Athena, named for the goddess of wisdom and strategic warfare. Today marks not just the launch of groundbreaking technology I began, but the celebration of what can be accomplished when innovation is paired with ethics, when credit is given where due, and when diverse voices are included in the development process. In the front row sat Caroline Miller and Wei Lin, now our Chief Ethics Officer and Director of AI Architecture, respectively. Both had flourished in the new corporate culture we had created, their talents finally recognized and rewarded appropriately. Project Athena represents a fundamental rethinking of how artificial intelligence can learn and adapt while maintaining ethical boundaries, I continued, gesturing to the demonstration area where our team waited to showcase the technology. It combines cutting-edge machine learning with rigorous safety protocols developed by our expanded ethics committee. As I stepped aside for Wei to lead the technical presentation, I caught sight of Diane Foster, now the permanent president of the Meridian Division, nodding approvingly from the side of the stage. Under her leadership, Meridian had been transformed, its toxic culture replaced by one of collaboration and mutual respect. The integration hadn't been without challenges. Some of Robert's most loyal supporters had resigned rather than adapt to our new standards. Others had required time to adjust to leadership that valued transparency and shared credit. But the results spoke for themselves. Employee satisfaction up 47%, innovation metrics at an all-time high, and a pipeline of new products that had investors buzzing with excitement. After the presentation concluded to enthusiastic applause, I mingled with attendees at the reception, accepting congratulations and fielding questions about the technology's potential applications. A tap on my shoulder drew my attention to Catherine, who gestured discreetly toward a woman hovering near the refreshment table. "Robert's mother," Catherine murmured. "She asked to speak with you privately." I nodded, surprised but curious. During my marriage to Robert, Margaret Blackwood had been cordial but distant, clearly viewing me as not quite good enough for her son. After our divorce, she had predictably sided with Robert, even giving interviews supporting his version of events. During the acquisition, Mrs. Blackwood, I greeted her, approaching with a professional smile. "This is unexpected." Margaret Blackwood had aged in the decade since I'd seen her last, but still carried herself with the regal posture of someone accustomed to social power. Her expression was difficult to read as she studied me. "Elena," she acknowledged with a slight nod. "You've done well for yourself." "Thank you. I'm surprised to see you here today." She glanced around at the impressive space, taking in the Phoenix Group logo prominently displayed alongside the newly redesigned Meridian emblem. "I received an invitation," she said, producing an embossed card from her purse. "Though not from you, I suspect." I raised an eyebrow. "No, not from me. May I ask who sent it?" "Your mother," Margaret replied with a hint of amusement. "Carmela and I have found ourselves at the same charity functions recently. She can be persuasive." I made a mental note to have a word with my mother about her meddling, though I couldn't help but admire her audacity. "Well, I hope you found the presentation illuminating," I said, preparing to excuse myself. "Robert has moved to Seattle," Margaret said abruptly. "He's working for a small startup. Nothing like what he had here." I kept my expression neutral, unsure why she was sharing this information. "I wish him well in his new venture." Margaret studied me for a long moment. "You know, when you two divorced, he told me you wouldn't amount to much without him. That you'd probably end up in some middle management position, always resentful of his success." The bluntness of her statement was startling, but I maintained my composure. "That sounds like Robert." "It does, doesn't it?" She sighed, an unexpected vulnerability crossing her features. "I believed him, you know. I thought he was the brilliant one, the visionary. I never questioned whether the success he claimed as his own truly belonged to him alone." I remained silent, sensing she had more to say. After that press conference, the one where that young man revealed Robert had taken his idea, I started thinking about things differently. Margaret straightened her shoulders. I remembered how often you used to share insights at our family. Dinners, ideas that Robert would dismiss, then present as his own weeks later at the next gathering. This admission from Robert's staunchest defender was something I had never expected. "Why are you telling me this, Mrs. Blackwood?" "Because I owe you an apology," she said firmly. "I failed to see what was happening. Worse, I reinforced Robert's belief that he was entitled to take credit for other people's work, including yours." I took a moment to process her words, feeling a complex mixture of vindication and unexpected compassion for this woman who had finally recognized her son's true nature. "Thank you for saying that," I replied sincerely. "It can't have been easy to confront this reality about Robert." "No," she agreed, "but necessary. At my age, one becomes increasingly concerned with setting things right." She straightened, some of her traditional formality returning. "Your mother speaks very highly of you, you know. She always did, even when you were struggling after the divorce." I smiled, thinking of my mother's unwavering faith in me. "She's my greatest champion." Margaret nodded, then extended her hand in a formal gesture. "Congratulations on your success, Elena. It appears you've built something meaningful here, something based on values my son never fully understood." As she walked away, I felt a surprising sense of closure. Margaret's acknowledgement represented the final piece of vindication, recognition from the person who had most steadfastly believed in Robert's version of events. Catherine appeared at my side, curiosity evident in her expression. "Everything okay?" "Yes," I said, watching Margaret exit the reception. "Better than okay, actually." Later that evening, as the successful launch celebration wound down, I found myself in my office at Phoenix headquarters, reviewing the day's press coverage. The technology media was unanimously positive about Project Athena, praising both its innovative design and the ethical framework we had built into its core architecture. A light knock drew my attention to the door, where Wei Lin stood hesitantly. "Wei, come in. Excellent presentation today." He entered, taking a seat across from my desk. "Thank you. But that's not why I'm here." I set aside my tablet, giving him my full attention. "What's on your mind?" "I received a job offer from Vanessa Pierce's company yesterday," he said. "Triple my current salary plus equity. She says she needs someone with my expertise to lead their AI division." I leaned back, studying him thoughtfully. "That's a generous offer. Are you considering it?" "That's just it," Wei said, looking slightly confused. 6 months ago, I would have jumped at it. But now... He gestured vaguely. "The work we're doing here matters. The way we're doing it matters. Money isn't everything." I smiled, recognizing in Wei's words the transformation that had occurred throughout both companies since the acquisition. "What are you going to do?" "I turned it down," he said simply. "But it made me realize something I wanted to share with you. When Robert stole my idea, it nearly destroyed my belief in myself. I thought maybe I wasn't good enough, that maybe my concepts weren't as valuable as I believed." I nodded, understanding all too well the self-doubt that came from having one's contributions dismissed or appropriated. "What you've built here," Wei continued, "isn't just a successful company. You've created an environment where people can recover from that kind of damage, where innovation is protected not just legally, but culturally." His words touched me deeply, articulating something I had hoped to achieve but hadn't fully acknowledged even to myself. "Thank you, Wei. That means more than you know." After he left, I sat in silence for a long moment, reflecting on how far we had come. When I had first conceived of acquiring Meridian, my motivation had been complex. Part strategic business move, part personal vindication. But somewhere along the way, it had evolved into something more meaningful. My phone buzzed with a text from Diane. Final numbers for Q2. Meridian Division up 31% year over year. Team is celebrating. You should be here. I smiled, gathering my things. The Phoenix Group's headquarters was only 10 minutes from the Meridian offices, a proximity I had specifically arranged during the integration to ensure I could be present for both teams. When I arrived at Meridian, the atmosphere was jubilant. The quarterly results had exceeded even our optimistic projections, validating the sweeping changes we had implemented. Employees who had once worked in silos under Robert's leadership were now collaborating across departments, their combined talents yielding innovations that neither company could have achieved alone. "There she is," Diane called as I entered, raising her glass in a toast. "The architect of our Renaissance." I waved off the praise, but couldn't help feeling a surge of pride as I looked around at the transformed company. In Robert's day, these quarterly celebrations had been exclusive affairs, limited to senior management. Now, employees from all levels mingled freely, each recognized for their contributions to our shared success. Caroline Miller approached, champagne in hand. "I just heard from the ethics panel at the Technology Summit. They want us to present on how we've integrated ethical considerations into Project Athena's development process." "That's excellent news," I replied. "You should lead the presentation. This has been your vision from the beginning." As the celebration continued around us, Catherine appeared at my side, her expression surprisingly solemn given the festive atmosphere. "I just got word from our contacts in Seattle," she said quietly. "Robert's startup failed. Their funding was pulled after the prototype demonstration revealed fundamental flaws in the concept. I absorbed this information, searching for any hint of satisfaction within myself and finding none. That's unfortunate for their team, I said finally. Catherine studied me curiously. You really don't care anymore, do you, about what happens to him? I considered her observation thoughtfully. It's not that I don't care. It's that his success or failure no longer has any bearing on my story. And it was true. Somewhere during these 6 months of rebuilding Meridian, of watching talented people finally thrive under ethical leadership, my focus had completely shifted. Robert had become irrelevant, not through my deliberate effort to exclude him, but simply because the future we were creating was so much more compelling than any lingering thoughts of the past. As the evening wound down, I found myself on the rooftop terrace of the Meridian building, gazing out at the Chicago skyline now bathed in the golden light of sunset. The door opened behind me, and I turned to find my mother approaching with 2 glasses of champagne. I thought I might find you up here, she said, handing me one of the glasses. You always did like to get the big picture view. I smiled, accepting the champagne. I hear you've been conspiring with Margaret Blackwood. My mother shrugged unapologetically. Someone needed to show her what her son couldn't see, that you've built something remarkable here. She apologized to me today, I told her, for not seeing Robert's behavior for what it was. Better late than never, my mother observed. Though I'm more interested in how you felt about it. I considered the question carefully, vindicated initially, but then mostly peaceful, like closing a book I'd finished reading long ago but had left open on the table. She nodded, understanding as always. And now? With Meridian flourishing under your leadership, with Project Athena launching successfully, with everything you've accomplished, how do you feel now? I gazed out at the city stretching before us, at the buildings where people were creating and collaborating and living their complex lives. I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, I said simply. Not because of Robert or in spite of him, but because this is the path I chose for myself. My mother smiled, raising her glass. To choices, then, and to the woman who made them so wisely. We clinked glasses as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the sky in shades of amber and gold, reminiscent of the phoenix emblem that had become my personal symbol of transformation. Later that night, as I prepared for bed in my penthouse apartment, I noticed a small package on my nightstand that hadn't been there that morning. Inside was a leather-bound journal with a note from my assistant. Found in archived boxes from the old Meridian storage. Thought you should have this. I opened the journal to find my own handwriting filling its pages, ideas, sketches, and concepts I had recorded during my marriage to Robert. Notes on artificial intelligence architecture that eerily presaged Project Daedalus. Thoughts on ethical implementation of machine learning algorithms that could have prevented the very problems Caroline's team had identified. As I flipped through the pages, I remembered writing these thoughts, sharing them with Robert over dinner, or during weekend walks along the lake. Ideas he had dismissed as impractical or naive, only to later present versions of them in company meetings as his own brilliant insights. I closed the journal, feeling not anger but a profound sense of reclamation. These had been my ideas all along, visions that had been devalued and appropriated, but had ultimately found their way back to me, manifested now in the groundbreaking work of the Phoenix Group and the transformed Meridian Technologies. My phone chimed with an email notification. Opening it, I found a message from a name I hadn't seen in years. Dr. Elisa Chen, my graduate school advisor who had once told me I had the potential to revolutionize how we think about technological ethics. Elena, the email began, I've been following the development of Project Athena with great interest. The ethical framework you've built into its architecture is precisely what we discussed in your dissertation all those years ago. You've taken theoretical concepts and made them operational in ways I only dreamed might be possible. Would you consider giving a guest lecture to my graduate seminar next month? My students would benefit enormously from hearing how these principles can be successfully implemented in commercial technology. I smiled, remembering those long discussions in Dr. Chen's office about the future of AI and the critical importance of building ethical guardrails into its very foundation. She had believed in my vision when it was nothing more than academic theory. Now, I had the opportunity to show her students how theory could become reality with the right leadership and organizational culture. I typed a quick reply accepting the invitation, then set my phone aside and walked to the window. The Chicago night spread before me, a tapestry of lights representing countless lives and stories interconnected in ways both visible and invisible. 10 years ago, when Robert had walked out, I had stood at a different window in a different home, wondering how I would rebuild my life from the ashes of broken dreams and betrayed trust. I could never have imagined then the path that lay ahead, the challenges I would face, the company I would build, the lives I would impact through my leadership. Robert had left me behind, thinking he was moving toward greater success without the encumbrance of a wife whose ambitions didn't align with his carefully crafted image. He couldn't have known that in discarding me, he had actually freed me to become someone far more powerful than the supportive spouse I had limited myself to being. In the reflection of the window glass, I saw not the devastated woman from a decade ago, but the leader I had become, complex, compassionate, and uncompromising in my vision for ethical innovation. The journey from there to here hadn't been about revenge, though I had initially framed it that way in my mind. It had been about reclamation of my ideas, my potential, my right to define success on my own terms. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The technology landscape was constantly evolving, competitors were always emerging, and maintaining the delicate balance between innovation and ethics required perpetual vigilance. But for tonight, I allowed myself to simply appreciate the significance of what had been accomplished. The Phoenix Group and Meridian Technologies were no longer defined by Robert Blackwood's legacy of appropriated ideas and compromised ethics. They were defined by a new standard of innovation with integrity, one that recognized and rewarded the contributions of all team members, regardless of gender or status. As I turned from the window and prepared for sleep, I thought about the question my mother had asked earlier. How did I feel now? The answer was even clearer than before. I felt complete. Not because I had become Robert's boss or acquired the company he had thought was his achievement alone. Not even because his professional reputation had been rightfully adjusted to reflect the reality of his behavior. I felt complete because I had fulfilled the potential that had always existed within me, potential that Robert had sought to diminish but had ultimately failed to extinguish. In rebuilding myself from the ashes of our marriage, I had discovered strength, vision, and purpose far beyond anything I had imagined possible. The phoenix doesn't rise to reclaim what was lost in the fire. It rises transformed, more powerful than before, ready to soar toward a future unencumbered by the limitations of its past. And as I drifted toward sleep, I knew with absolute certainty that my flight had only just begun. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.